In January this year, our Royal Photographic Society Special Interest Group, East Anglia Documentary, embarked on a project with the working title of Passenger 24. The aim, or mission statement if you want to call it that, was to document our adventures to, from, and within our sphere of influence, with stills photography and or MP4 on a budget. Like many clubs and societies within the United Kingdom, there is evidence that maybe things need to change. Our own society published in 2001 a 5-year strategic plan titled Photography for Everyone. In this publication, available at rps.org, there are references to changes in photography by both technology and social demographics. It is to both of these valid points that this project has focused. We are all aware that the introduction on the smartphone has put a very capable camera and now, in most cases, a 4K video taker, into the pockets of 7 billion people worldwide since its first, rather restricted in features introduction, in the year 2000. No legacy camera maker can even dream of sales figures of this magnitude, and this does mean that in the 170 years since its formation, the Royal Photographic Society must address the last quarter century and adapt. This film explores with images and clips what can be done with a sub £300 smartphone, without personal transport, the passenger bit, within a reasonable budget envelope. Now in December, as we edit these clips together in DaVinci Resolve, we are aware that, on the horizon, consideration and watchfulness must be given to the Australian Online Safety Amendment, Social Media Minimum Age, Bill 2024. This will undoubtedly have, and cause, teething troubles over the next 12 months for both the design and implementation of the legislation, but it is, at the same time, quite likely to remove the sandbox environment of photographic development. So putting the politics on one side, and ignoring the fact that in all probability our photographic journeys began before the age of 16, let us look at the points we are trying to make here. Today, a recognized branded, quality, entry-level camera is likely to be at or around the same price as a mid-range smartphone, which you are going to have with you anyway. So for this project, starting with our overnight trip to Grimsby in April, we are using an Honor 90 Lite at 50 megapixels. Our journey began at Norwich, and by way of Peterborough and Lincoln, we arrived at our night stop of the Yarborough Hotel, adjacent to Grimsby Town Station. Our thanks to East Midland Railway for their permission to film on board their trains on this trip, and at Lincoln Station which they run. The Yarborough Hotel, a Wetherspoon establishment, provided an excellent operating base, at a more than reasonable cost, during our stay in the town. Our relationship with Grimsby goes back to the 50s, and the late 70s through to 2000, and now, as we end 2024, it is going to be the subject of rejuvenation. It was good to return. We were up at Hay-on-Wye, not as a passenger, but as a driver, and we managed to pick up this book, second-hand, featuring Lowestoft. So we just had to make the trip into Suffolk. Again leaving Norwich by rail, this time on Greater Anglia, we headed down through Reedham to the most easterly town in the United Kingdom. This place features significantly twice in our commercial life, once through the frozen food factory, and the second time through the offshore wind companies using the port as a service point for the farms just off the coast. In July of 2022 we filmed the Lowestoft Smack race from here, and this is on our channel for that year under the Out and About playlist. Lowestoft Inner Harbour was also familiar to us, as it was where we did our VHF course and acquired our motor yacht certificate. South of Great Yarmouth and Galston, this port was also a major player in the fishing industry, and the Joseph Conrad pub, our operational base for the day, has, or had, many old photographs displayed on the wall. Closed for refurbishment a couple of months ago, we have yet to revisit this establishment to check it out, but we will come back in 2025 for sure. Interestingly, some of the highlights of the history of Lowestoft are displayed in panels at the railway station, and certainly well worth the read. And then it was June and time to board the coach for our visit to the Normandy beaches and the Bayeux Commonwealth War Graves Commission, Service of Remembrance, 80 years on. This trip was inspired by our previous project, Slipstream 24, which linked the 6th of June in Normandy with the United States Army Air Force at Tibenham in Norfolk, home of the 445th Bomb Group, which flew missions in support of the landings. You can also find this on our channel, or you can hover on this QR code. Whilst we look here at the installation of Standing with Giants, under the For Your Tomorrow title, it is worth remembering that the 1,475 individual pieces represents the loss of each soldier recorded on the 6th of June, 1944 under the British command. We, and our team of like-minded travelers, walked the British Normandy Memorial at Vers-sur-Mer, paying our respects. It is here, in this northwestern region of France, that we should pause and consider why being a passenger is perhaps preferable to the self-drive. By using the escorted battlefield tour offered by Ledger Holidays for an event such as this, not only do you travel rather like a platoon from 80 years before, but the access, ticketing and security issues are all taken care of by the tour operator. This was our second experience of being a coach passenger, and we are signed up again for 2025 on another Ledger Battlefield tour, which we will film for, and also post on, the channel in August next year, on the assumption we are all still here. At the end of June, having returned from France, it was off to Grantham on East Midland Railway to support the Grantham Aviation Society, who were presenting a family association with the Gloucester Javelin. It was in fact only later in the year that we found a link between Grantham and Walton-on-the-Naze, a subsequent chapter in Passenger 24, which we will come on to later in this video. But safe to say that the Machine Gun Corps had a presence in the town with the Belton Park Training Centre and Depot in 1915 to 1922. Our accommodation had been purchased through Booking.com for one night, and was wholly acceptable, with once again the catering being taken care of by the Wetherspoon establishment around the corner from the hotel. Looking back now in December and without rereading the notes, we can reflect on the impressions the town left with us 6 months on. Firstly, and unquestionably probably best known, is the railway station, as it appears as a through stop on the East Coast Main Line. The station, built in 1852, is 105 miles from King's Cross, and Hull trains cover this in around an hour. Operated by London and North Eastern Railway, it does have all the facilities a traveller requires, and this is not the first time we have used the station, as it compares very favourably against Peterborough as a transit point for going further north. Those of us of a certain age will probably always associate the market town of Grantham with its most famous daughter, one Margaret Thatcher, or Baroness Thatcher of Kesteven. She was the Member of Parliament for Finchley in North London, which is another link to the family history, being the matriarchal grandparents' borough of choice. However, without focusing too much on this very divisive British politician, the one thing she does seem to have on her side are the people of Grantham, and the statue of the Prime Minister, which is without question shown respect. Other notables from the town, which is a very walking-friendly place, are Sir Isaac Newton, who probably needs no introduction, and is commemorated with a wooden apple sculpture alongside the River Witham. Captain Albert Ball VC, MC, DSO with 2 bars of the Royal Flying Corps, born in Nottingham, went to school in the town and learned to fly at the RFC Flying School at Mousehold Heath in Norwich. It says 11 on the plaque, but research shows 40 plus to probably be more accurate. For many decades, the closest sea link to the continent from East Anglia is that which departs from Harwich to the Hook of Holland. Historically, it has of course been used by the Kinder transport and the Dutch royalty just before the Second World War, and the clip on Harwich Town refers and reflects on this route in greater detail. To bring this up to date, in July, we decided to check out the service again rather than taking the tunnel on our road trip to the Vosges Mountains in France. The current ships, the Stena Hollandica and the Stena Britannica, have had some service changes made on board since the pandemic, and this was a chance to check it out. For our road trips in 2025, we will almost certainly go back to the tunnel based on price, flexibility, and convenience that this alternative mode of transport offers. But we do have a particular soft spot for the Dutch town and the Dutch people, which has been so important to us over the last 20-odd years, and the association we have had commercially with the Netherlands since the early 1970s. At this point, we should take time out to look at what really is the passenger, the benefits and the drawbacks. The noun passenger is defined as a traveler on a public or private conveyance other than the driver, pilot, or crew. This project was born out of the desire to focus on the younger photographers without personalized transport, and at the other end of the scale those who have either given up their car by choice, or have had issues with renewal of their driving license, in addition to those in between who just fancy either an escorted trip or independent travel. For this project, the membership have traveled by train, light rail, ferry, taxi, and coach. During the course of the project, we have established that the primary benefits can be listed as cheaper, no searching or paying for parking, somebody else in charge, ability to multitask whilst traveling. The fundamental drawback is the lack of flexibility, which can be added to the geographical limitations afforded by somebody else's transport. The other limitations as a passenger really relates to how much kit you want to carry, as you will be carrying all of it at the same time. In order to mitigate this rather fundamental obstacle, we embrace the smartphone with gusto, and from here on in on this video, we started migrating the images from 50 megapixels to 200 megapixels with a mid-project upgrade from the Honor 90 Lite to the Honor 90 Smartphone 5G. Still only 300 quid on Amazon. This really is Hello China. The new phone though was as slippy as a wet eel, so we needed to add a Joby mount and handheld Joby GorillaPod to ensure stability and to prevent slippage with the ensuing catastrophic screen shatter. And then it was off to the east end of London for the first of 4 trips into the capital, all on Greater Anglia, and probably of significant documentary importance, as the government has just announced here in December that it will be brought back into public ownership in 2025. East London is of importance to us as an area of London where we have a certain affinity to Poplar in the matriarchal genealogy. Even though well served by the A13, there is no way we would recommend driving into the city out of choice. Far better to take the train and tube, bus, DLR, walk or river boat to get around. You will probably have guessed by now that we are pretty committed to this passenger 24 method of photography, as it is something you can do whilst actually traveling. Although in 2025 we are going to be running The Motorist as the annual project for the group covering bits of the region not easily accessible by train, we have in the calendar still booked, and will book further rail trips, as you cannot interact with other travellers when you are behind the wheel, and that really has been part of the journey in 2024. With other members having signed up for volunteering on the North Norfolk Railway, rest assured we expect many railway-themed journeys and unique images next year. Sometimes, when you visit places as a photographer, you do occasionally almost get a déjà vu experience, and we certainly felt it here. Whether it was from Tales at the Fireside in Finchley, or perhaps something else entirely, of all the places we have visited this year, Poplar and West India Quay probably made the sharpest impression. We had been told of poverty and slums in the 1920s, East European immigration, Chinatown, and the work of the Salvation Army in great detail. What we found now, 100 years later, is possibly another side to the tale. Our next destination, again by Greater Anglia, was Walton-on-the-Naze by way of Wivenhoe, the latter having piqued our interest from the book we had acquired in Hay. Apparently, the Cook's shipyard at Wivenhoe had been taken over by Vosper for war work, and 16 motor torpedo boats were constructed here in the early 1940s together with RAF launches 2575 and 2576. This was not the first time the military had taken an interest in this tidal river, just shy of England's oldest town of Colchester, when in AD 43 the Romans were shifting their 20th Valyria Legion into the area. The next 17 years saw the consolidation of this outport to Colchester, but then Boudica and the possible British army, as opposed to just the Iceni, turned up and spoilt Rome's party. We suppose these days they would have started a petition calling for new elections, but, back then, the Britons of the East led by the Queen of the Iceni, delivered the slaughter at Camulodunum, leading to the death of every Roman in the town, that is every man, every woman and every child dead. Unfortunately, pretty soon, she would run into a spot of Latin in the form of retributio, somewhere in Warwickshire, and that was goose cooked for her. So Wivenhoe the town, what do we think? We really do like this one. Is it better than Woodbridge, which we also visited this summer, and even though the Suffolk town has scored #1 place to live in the UK, this place is better. Don't take our word for it, jump the train and go for a pint and a wander. Not being from Essex, and indeed not living in the county, this trip up to the Naze was all new to us, but we had received suggestions from fellow members as to what to look out for. In 2025, we are going to use this town for one of our quarterly meetings, and members are urged to really make the effort, as the town does not disappoint. Once we had a look around, we were off on the Sunshine coastline by way of the northern spur to Walton on the Naze. We should perhaps talk a little bit about the workflow here, which can be broken down into 4 major functions. Firstly, and the subject of this project, is transportation. Obviously, before you can set up and compose a shot, you have to get there. The purpose behind Passenger 24 is to illustrate how you can get to, and back from, a suitable location by use of public transport. Secondly, we must look at composition. Framing the shot, or walking through the storyboard for an MP4, is at the absolute center of the workflow, inasmuch if you get this wrong, all the other parts fall away. We cannot, and would not, critique any image by any photographer who is working in the field of creative arts, so this bit is down to through the lens. Suffice it to say that by using a smartphone, the equivalent of a viewfinder is much bigger and perhaps more user-friendly. Next in this workflow, we have post-production. By using digital media as the default photographic option, you are going to need some form of editing suite to process that data. For stills we are using Affinity Photo, and, for MP4, we use, as evidenced in this clip, DaVinci Resolve, which is available either as a free download version, or the more intensive Studio, which runs this one. This allows us to create, adjust and deliver a timeline before rendering it out into the YouTube format. Lastly, once happy with what you have produced, you can publish, and more about that later in the video. So what about Walton on the Naze? An Essex town looking out over the North Sea has been on the target list ever since Arthur Ransome wrote Secret Water. And it did not disappoint. We had never heard of Columbine VC until we came across the statue, and it was only then we found that as a member of the Machine Gun Corps, he would have visited the depot in Grantham. The chances are that any journey from the sticks is at some time going to involve London, especially if you are a passenger travelling by rail, and here we have exactly that. And this is where we will talk about the end product. For regular viewers of the channel, you will be aware that in the past, through our Not Just Bristol exhibitions held at the Forum in Norwich, we chose to go with hard prints in A4, A3 and A2 formats, which were more in keeping with the images we wished to put forward as exhibits. However, with the decision to take these images online in 2024, we thought that pixel peeping would no longer be a hindrance, and that we could instead use the 50 to 200 megapixel output from our Hello China devices. We estimate over the 4 exhibitions we held in Norwich with hard prints, we had a footfall of perhaps 1,000 visitors in total across the whole effort we put into the events. As a comparison, in the last 365 days from today, the 9th of December, we have had 21,000 visitors to the channel, which pretty much has all been the Royal Photographic Society East Anglia Documentary Group branded. This is way more than we had anticipated, and as a result we have now registered the brand with the Information Commissioner's Office here in the United Kingdom, based on a limited liability company which carries specific photographic insurance. So what we are doing with this new display mode is interspersing still image plates with MP4 as a hybrid model. Let us now turn our attention to publishing. Prior to the pandemic we attended a course at The Guardian, in York Place besides King's Cross, run by a chap who used to work for the BBC, and having paid the attendance fee, we received instruction in editing within the Apple environment, using a smartphone. This was in addition to the other courses we stumped up for, run by one of their staff photographers, on stills based around photo essays, which, after a significant learning curve, brings us to where we are today. Our product is more akin to chapters of a book, recognizing the instruction to try to keep individual clips to around the 2-minute mark, stitched together, which can run on and on and on. In order to keep the content fresh, we have endeavored throughout the year to deliver 2 to 3 minutes, at least once a week, unless, as here in December, we have a project which requires more man-hours to put down the final cut from the rushes. Being totally independent, we are, within the scope of the YouTube terms and conditions, also somewhat free, especially as we adhere to, and apply, the journalistic exemption under the Data Protection Act, 2018. Given that there's always a desire to publish at the time we take the images. As a special interest group then, we are able to publish pretty much what we want, and go in any direction which takes our fancy. Last year, our project was built around the old bases here in the eastern counties of the 8th United States Army Air Force. This year, through the Passenger 24 project, we are traveling on, and highlighting, public transport as the method of choice to get to our photographic locations. Next year we are going to look at our regional locations through the 2025 project of the motorist. This new 12-month project is designed around a photographic and video essay, whereby we move away possibly from highlighting the equipment, such as the smartphone, and focus more on the location with images taken by any camera. The motorist will, by its very definition, mean that lugging heavy kit around the counties is no longer a problem, and we therefore expect to see coverage of subjects taken with much longer focal lengths in areas other than those aligned to the railway. So back to this project and the rail network to both the capital and the Suffolk or Essex coasts. The regional spurs off to the coast are branches from the trunk route between Liverpool Street and Norwich. Hopefully, as in the case of Wivenhoe, we were looking for either hidden gems to share with you the viewer, or, if not that photogenic, at least expanding the knowledge of our other regional areas which may inspire. Let us look at, and talk a bit, about Dovercourt and Harwich. The train ride from Norwich took us to Dovercourt, where we had booked in for a night at the Wetherspoon Hotel. This was really because the weekend we stayed was in fact the same date as the Harwich International Sea Shanty Festival, and even though we had booked 6 months earlier, it was at that time difficult to get accommodation any closer. However, this was no bad thing, and it did give us the opportunity to walk along the foreshore and look at the numerous historical plaques, courtesy of the Harwich Society, on our way into Halfpenny Quay, where we had booked a trip on the sailing barge Victor. These projects do take us to places you would not normally visit, with the drive to create content and images pushing us perhaps further than we would normally go. The Harwich Museum is a great place to start for finding out about the history of the northernmost coastal town in Essex. The actual name of Harwich is a derivation of the Old English for military settlement. As the only safe anchorage between the Thames and the Humber, it has certainly borne out that moniker over the years, and the museum documents this, century by century. The more recent history around the Second World War is well supported by details surrounding the kinder transport, which involved the holiday camp at Dovercourt, which filled in as a transport depot, as the children were bussed through the town from Parkston. Here we will acknowledge Child of Dovercourt, number 152, who died this week of filming. One of the 196 children on the TSS Prague, she arrived on the 2nd of December, 1938. She went on to become a finalist for the 2007 Pulitzer, and was a quintessential New Yorker, but her first novel, Other People's Houses, had its roots in Essex. Nowadays it is Stena which holds the pennant on this route, with its twice-daily passenger and cargo sailings to the Hook of Holland, and whilst of superior standard, the TSS Prague was allegedly decked out in the style of an ocean liner. Clearly back then Felixstowe was an Edwardian resort without the container terminal. However, further away in the annals of time, and reflected in the named train line of today, we have reference to the Mayflower. In the Harwich Museum, there are major accounts of the sailing, and also a notice board showing some of the 30 million descendants from the original 102 passengers, and the 30-odd crew. We are talking famous names here. So that was Clacton-on-Sea, which we visited on Armistice Day, and a couple of days later, we were off down to Rochester. Both towns were new to us, as we had not visited either before, despite having some rallies on the Medway, This is a classic case of letting the images do the talking for both of these towns, as we knew very little other than doing the research on Wiki. Clacton had character based on suitability for bank holiday weekends from the 50s and 60s, with Norton doing Oppo to Vespa. Rochester was different and probably worth a return visit, possibly under the Motorist Project, as the dogleg from Stratford to Stratford International adds an hour to the journey, and it is surprisingly hilly for us people from the flatlands to be without assistance from burning carbon. As we said in the travel clip we posted on the channel after our Rochester trip, the castle, operated by English Heritage, open every day, apart from the day we visited, and the cathedral, clearly need a return visit to perhaps do them justice. There is historic Chatham down the road as well, but, as an access point for a road trip into the county of Kent, it does promote itself as having merit by virtue of its location just off the M2, and 2¼ hours, 127 miles from Norwich. So when we hear back from the Royal Engineers Museum, we will schedule a return in 2025 together with a road trip along the North Kent coast. So, to wrap up this project, we should come up with some conclusions and facts. We started out with a Chinese smartphone capable of doing high resolution at 50 megapixels. The Woodbridge trip we have alluded to here is not included in this project, as that was taken on a full-frame camera with Zeiss glass. You can see those results on the channel and draw your own conclusions with £3,000 against 300. We did not get barked at once during our filming using the smartphone, but, by contrast, a regular camera does cause controversy on the private land of the railway. Would we have gone to some of these places without an ongoing project such as Passenger 24? Probably not. So, in terms of value for money, did the £4,000 or so we spent over the year broaden our horizons? Yes, it did. We will leave you, the viewer, to decide whether the quality is as good, or at least no worse, than that which gets uploaded elsewhere. And then the hardware itself, the undisputed, mega advantage of the smartphone is that you become invisible, and for that reason alone, be it vlogging, street or travel, makes it an outright winner.